The Cleveland Cavaliers had a tremendous regular season this year and beat everybody's expectations, and that was great. But the downside to that is it made their flame out in the playoffs all that more heart crushing, and just it brings a lot of skepticism and a lot of cynicism to their ball club right now. And the one thing I want to talk about today is, moving into the off season, what are the three big things that they need to do in order to improve their roster this year and hopefully have a better chance of winning in the postseason next year. First and foremost, they need to get a lot tougher. Whether that's through internal growth, Evan Mobley and Darius Garland getting more physically stronger. Maybe Jared Allen flipping a switch, maybe another player or two flipping a switch. But when I look at this team and I look at toughness, you know, I'm not saying that these other players don't play through injury or don't do anything like that. But as far as toughness goes, like Max Drew seems like a gritty, tough guy. You know, Donovan Mitchell seems like a gritty, tough guy. Aside from that, other than like your Tristan Thompson's way on the bench, aside from that, they don't have a lot of like people that I think are going to go in and cause problems and like push the boundaries. That's the other thing. They need to find a way to either improve this mentally, internally, or they need to find a way to go out and get people that are going to push the boundary. This team has a lot of good young gentlemen, and that's great whenever you're trying to build a culture and you're trying to succeed. But in order to push them over the top, you're going to need to get in a guy who can play in your rotation that is going to push the limits. One thing, like going back to that Pacers series, whenever they needed a rebound and whenever it was a free throw situation, they needed a rebound. Aaron Nesmith didn't care that it was, technically a lane violation. He went up and got the ball and dared the refs to call it, and they didn't, and that's why they won game 2. We need a few people like that who are going to push the boundaries and who are going to push people and make a difference. And if that means that they foul out a game, they don't care. But we need to find a way to get tougher. And then this brings up like the Jared Allen point, where it's just we've seen him consistently over the years just get pushed around and get bullied. And it happened in the Knicks series, and then this year it's just like he was a no-show in a few of those Pacers games. And we need a true big that's going to rebound and is going to be tough. And that's the one thing I don't know if he can do. And when you look at his salary and you look at that he's an all-star and all the things that he can do well, he's a switchable defender, he's athletic, he can run the floor, he can clean up a lot of misses. You potentially could trade him and pick up somebody on the free agent market who can give you 80% of all those things, but will be ultimately tougher for you. But that's the big key. They need to get tougher. And then so that's one, they need to get tough. Two, they need to get more flexible with their lineups and rotations. They need more quality ball players. And the reason I say that is like looking at what the Thunder and the Pacers are doing in the finals right now. Miles Turner and Isaiah Hartenstein, they're not playing a lot, and these are core starters for them all season long and throughout the playoffs. It just goes to show you that certain matchups you're gonna need flexibility to bring in a guy off the bench and roll with him, even though somebody doesn't have it rolling. Thinking of the Cavs, look at like how bad Ty Jerome was in that second series. They didn't have, especially with Garland being out, they didn't have another person they could consistently go to provide them a scoring punch, and it really, really hurt their offense. Similarly on the defensive end, Jared Allen was getting cooked in a lot of those one-on-one matchups, and they didn't really have anybody that they could go to that could give them a different look and could spell some minutes for them. So they just need to get more flexibility and find a way to add more people to this team. And then this goes into the third point. They need to get tougher. They need to add more flexibility, but they also need to find more two-way ball players that can play one-on-one offense and defense better. Right now, as far as the Cavs go, there are about 2 players, maybe 3, that you can go out there, go one-on-one and get me a bucket. Donovan Mitchell, obviously, and then when healthy, Evan Mobley and Darius Garland can both potentially do that. However, they need another person to be able to go out one-on-one and do it. Karis LeVert used to be a guy that you could bring in off the bench to do that, but they need to find a guy that can do that for them, because what the Pacers were doing a lot of times is, okay, we're not going to break down the defense and allow you to kick it out to a shooter for a wide open look. Yeah, sometimes the Cavs got open looks and they weren't hitting them in the playoffs. Part of that was because they were forcing you to beat them one-on-one, and we weren't able to consistently do it other than Donovan. Then additionally on defense, Darius Garland is not a two-way ball player, and he gets cooked consistently on the defensive end. Sam Merrill is not a great defender. Isaac Okoro and Dean Wade, they're great defenders, but they can't play offense. We need to get more players that you can insert, and you feel like you can run with them on both ends of the floor. That's a big thing this offseason, and I think a large part of that can be potentially resolved by trading Jared Allen for a 3-and-D type wing, or this team needs that. They need like a Pascal Siakam 4, or just a really good 3 that can help set up some of their lineups. And if that means you have to trade Jared Allen, do so. I think you can find a backup big to really help you out there. And then additionally, you need to go out and find yourself a backup point guard. And the backup center and backup point guards aren't positions you need to go out and spend buku bucks. You can generally find decent ones on the market for cheap. But it's going to be really hard to find a 3-and-D wing without giving up somebody like Jared Allen. So I think those are the big 3 things they need to consider is, how do they get tougher? How do they, add flexibility? They have a bunch of 6'5" to 6'8" guys on their roster. How do they get a backup point guard and a backup big? And then how do we add more people that can beat people off the dribble one-on-one, create things, and then additionally play defense? So with that being said, I thank you guys for listening and have yourself a great day. Peace.